Değerli konuklar, Bilişim 2010 27. Ulusal Bilişim Kurultayı açılış töreni Stanford Üniversitesi öğretim üyesi Profesör Doktor Peter Levin'in konuşmasıyla devam edecek. Ancak kendilerini kürsüye davet etmeden önce kendileri hakkında biraz bilgiler aktarmak istiyorum sizlere de. Doktora derecesini Carnegie Mellon Üniversitesi Elektronik ve Bilgisayar Mühendisliği bölümünde tamamlamış olan Profesör Levin'in yazılım sistemleri ve sanal güvenlik konularında 50'den fazla makalesi bulunmaktadır. Profesör Levin, doktora sonrası çalışmalar yapmak üzere Münih Teknik Üniversitesi'ne gitti. Boston Üniversitesi'nde Mühendislik Fakültesi dekanlığı görevlerinde bulundu. Levin aynı zamanda Stanford Üniversitesi'nde profesörlük görevine de devam etmektedir. Profesör Levin, Bill Clinton yönetiminin Beyaz Saray Yönetim ve Bütçe Ofisi'nde Başkan Clinton'ın başkanlık döneminde özel asistanı olarak görev yapmış. Bush döneminde ise Ulusal Bilim Vakfı'nın başkanlık nezdinde genç araştırmacısı olarak çalışmıştır. Beyaz Saray bünyesindeki Bilim ve Teknoloji Politikaları Ofisi'nde uzman danışman olarak görevlendirilmiştir. Şu anda bakanlığın Obama döneminde Beyaz Saray tarafından başlatılan Açık Devlet İnisiyatifi yöneticiliği görevini de yürüten Levin'in konuşmasını yapmak üzere kürsüye davet etmek istiyorum. Mr. Levin, I kindly invite you to stage, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again. I want to thank you very much for attending my talk this afternoon. I especially want to thank my host, Mr. Torhan Menteş, for the very kind invitation and magnificent hospitality on behalf of the Informatics Association of Turkey. I could not have been more warmly received. I also would like to thank my new friend and host, Mr. Erdem Erkul and his wife Aishu, for taking such good personal care of me, literally from the moment I got off the airplane until right now. Let me make sure I can pull this up. All right. Good. It'll be no surprise to you, I tell you nothing you don't already know, when I say that we have many problems in this world. We have economic issues and matters of social justice, food supply, healthcare issues, natural disasters, the most terrible one not very far from here. We have environmental issues, questions about sustainable consumption, the list goes on, women's rights, illiteracy, religious intolerance and fanaticism, maybe our most serious problem. We can either talk about them somehow creatively, constructively, angrily, loudly, but talking, or we can fight about them, maybe violently, with each other or with ourselves. I came to this conference because it is a conference about talking. And talking is a messy process. You're not going to like everything somebody says. You may not like everything I'm about to say. But I'm just talking. People's feelings can get hurt. They can be outraged. But mostly, people use this energy, this outrage, and they channel it to something constructive. They channel it to something useful. They channel it for change. In the US, we do this non-violently for now 140 years, every 2 years. And it's an imperfect process. The outcome is not always what we're looking for. I would tell you, as a true Democrat, the outcome is not even always fair. But it's nonviolent, and it is fundamentally constructive. As Churchill once said, it beats the alternatives of process, and I think every culture and every country that has ever tried this would agree. So if you agree with my litany of big problems, and if you agree that we need the collective power of all the brains that we can get The next question is, how do we engage them? The next question is, how do we create the platform, create the container of that dialogue, of that engagement? From the government's perspective, from my government's perspective, and from your perspective, citizens need information. They need it to participate, they need it to create, they need it to teach, and they need it to vote. That list also is long. Our need as a species, our need as people for data and for information is endless, because when we make it unlimited, our creativity and our peace is also endless. In the United States, we believe that we own that information. We paid for it, after all. Even if sometimes an occasional bureaucrat, I've met them recently, sees it differently. So along comes a new president who understands the benefit of more, not less. Even if people say mean things about him, even if people say personal things about him, he can take it. We all can take it. Some countries aren't sure how much internet access to provide, what applications, what services they should make available to their citizens. And some countries put it on YouTube. This is the choice that I will talk to you about this afternoon. Oops. Welcome to my open government talk. The first thing that we need to talk about is who gets to participate in this process of open government. Who gets to decide? I come from a technology background. I studied physics and math. Thank you for my kind introduction. It sounded good to me, even if I didn't understand very much, but I hope you said math and computer science. And here's the first element of President Obama's and Secretary Shinseki's Open Government Initiative. It's to get people to participate. And the first thing you need to participate is a little bit of courage. We are all geniuses. Einstein wasn't excluding anybody, but we're not always courageous. Not long after he took office, President Obama instructed the director of the Office of Management and Budget, a man named Peter Orszag, a famous guy in the United States, to create the rules and the processes of open government, and most importantly of all, to get it done, to make it happen, to unleash this information, to unleash this perspective, so that the citizens of the United States, in fact, so that the citizens of the world can see what we're doing and see how we're doing it. The three principles, and they're easy, you can do this, anybody can do this. The three principles are transparency, letting people see what goes on in government, participation, not just between citizens and their government, which is of course essential, but between agencies. In our country, probably in yours too, sometimes people who work in the Defense Department think that they're competing with the people who work in the State Department for money, for computers, for resources, for agenda. If you can create a central organizing structure, at least the open government part of this works better. And of course, collaboration. It's hard to know where to start. Do you start with your regulations? Not very glamorous, but important. Do you start with federal partnerships? Do you create the mechanisms of delivery of data, raw data? How many patients did you see? How much money did you spend? How many people have been injured? How many people are in prison? How many people did you educate? How many engineers do you have? Data, raw data. We have that initiative. It's called data.gov. Knowing where to start is difficult. It can be very challenging. But you have to start someplace, and in fact, it doesn't matter where you start. Just start. With my team, we've created in the Department of Veterans Affairs the so-called Open Government Plan. I invite you to look at it. It is on our website, www.va.gov, on the first page, and on behalf of our secretary. And what we've created now is a VA, Veteran Affairs, centric structure. But if I worked at transportation, I would tell you the same thing. If I worked for defense, I would be telling you the same thing. If I worked in foreign affairs, the same thing. Create the structure that makes the most sense. That on the one hand delivers the most information, and on the other hand delivers the most data. So I won't read you the list, but you can see that we've used the framework of President Obama's memo, and then we've interpreted this for ourselves. What do you mean by transparency? What do you mean by participation? What is the most important thing that you can do? We know what we think that is. Not everybody agrees. Not everybody agrees at VA. Not everybody agrees in government. We have this fight every day. Right now, today, our most important is a flagship initiative, the thing that we think will have the most impact identified in the plan, and we call this the VA Innovation Initiative, or VAI2. I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit. I understand that there's some academics and professional informaticists in the audience. I come from your world. I feel very much at home here. I want to have one, let me say, technical slide. I won't bore you with it too much. But it's a good framework, it's a good structure to think about the actual details of the implementation of open government. Your prime minister can say, hey, that guy from the United States has a good idea. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. Or somebody in the audience with influence or power or money can say, well, I don't wait for the central government to tell me that I want to share my data with other people in my country. I do that. I can do that by myself. Here's a framework for that. You need to make it easy for them to see it. I showed you the White House homepage a second ago. What I didn't show you was the blog site on the White House homepage, right? We're getting lots of feedback, not all of it very complimentary. Some of it very harsh. But we have the presentation layer. The technologists in the audience will be smiling. We have the business process layer. I come to the White House and I want to learn about space travel. I come to the White House and I want to know about how many elementary school teachers are we training, where the recovery money is being spent, how are we serving veterans? That's my job. How are we serving veterans? All those decisions, business process, the actual logic, and then last but not least, underneath, the data layer. Someplace in the world is a computer. Someplace in the world is a computer with this presentation. What you see on this screen is being served through the wires and the wireless and through this machine and through this cable right here. If I unplug it, that goes away. This presentation is coming from the internet. I've got a backup in case it didn't work, but we decided that we wanted to try to show you the power, really the freedom, at least the flexibility of doing it this way. So we have names. We call this Veterans Relationship Management. You'll call it Customer or Citizen Relationship Management. We have the business process layer, that's boring for you, and the Veterans Lifetime Electronic Record. It's just another example of data. You'll have different names. That's not the important part. The important part is, what does the citizen see? What are the business processes underneath it? And where does the data come from? And the cool thing, the fun thing, is that the data for this presentation comes from the internet. It comes from someplace I don't know. I think in Hungary, literally Hungary, not far from here. It ends up that if you accept the notion that you have to have this presentation layer, the business layer, and the data layer, none of that's hard. I'll come back to Turkey next month and I'll spend a day with Turhan or Eran, and I'll show you how to do this, or you don't need me. There are 500,000 people in the United States that know how to do this. There are 100,000 people here who already know. You don't need anybody for this. The hard part is the culture. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I won't do it. You work for President Obama. You will be here for 4 years. I've been here for 24 years. I could wait. See you. And they sit there with their arms crossed and mean looks, and they tell me every reason I have ever heard, and several new ones, very creative, why it cannot be done. You will hear these reasons too, I promise. And that is the big problem. There's one important slide. There's one thing that everybody in this room has to work on. If you want to do open government, if you are serious about open government, nothing else I said before matters. Everything else I'm about to say doesn't matter either. This is your problem, because this is everybody's problem. I work for a national hero. I work for someone who 10 years ago I couldn't have imagined that I would ever have the privilege, the life privilege of shaking his hand. And today I call him boss. And he called me on the phone last night to ask me a silly question, a fun question. The man's name is Eric Shinseki. In the United States, people would know this name. Maybe you've heard of him. He is a man who stands up for his principles. And sometimes standing up for his principles, when he was the 4-star chief of staff of the army at the beginning of the Iraq conflict, sometimes those principles were very hard to defend, even impossible. And today, I have the privilege of looking up to him and calling him boss. And so what he has asked me to do is take those 3 principles, I've already showed you, the 3 principles from President Obama. Obvious, easy, but now they're written down, that's what he wants. Transparency, collaboration, participation, and to map them to Eric Shinseki's principles, not different, people-centric, be hard on the problems, be hard on the obstacles, be hard on the business process, be hard on the computers, be very hard on your sales guys. But don't be hard on your colleagues. That's not the problem. The problem is the problem. People-centric, results-driven. I can get a big check from my boss today, and he gets a bigger check from his boss, the president, right? But now, with this new administration, we have metrics, we have performance metrics, and we have to say, how will this money be spent? Where will this money be spent? Who decides how the money is spent? When will it be spent? And how do we know if the money was spent in a sensible way, in a fair way, in a way that produces the outcomes that we all agreed we wanted, even the ones who didn't vote for him? And last but not least, we are very serious, under Eric Shinseki, under Secretary Shinseki, we are very serious about making sure that we leave this department better than we found it. So we are making careful, thoughtful, deliberate decisions that look to the future. Not the quick expedient ones, not the political ones, not the ones that get us in the newspaper or kill a bad story or promote the interest of the president or the secretary. Okay, maybe a little bit of that one. But we really are about providing veterans, in our case. We run the single largest hospital system in the United States, 6 million unique people, one system, arguably the best run system even compared to the private sector, which for the United States is unimaginable. Even compared to the private sector, if you look at access, if you look at cost, if you look at medical outcomes, the VA is either the best or nearly the best in every category. It's a huge thing. We want to make sure that we continue doing that. So all of this falls under the broad umbrella of innovation. And I have a friend and colleague from Carnegie Mellon here with me today who has heard our president talk about innovation as the combination of invention and, sorry about this, a little bit, it's a new presentation format, we're not comfortable yet. Innovation, which is new ideas, and implementation. If you want to be innovative, You have to have a whole bunch of new ideas. I'm going to tell you in this talk how we got 10,000 new ideas. I have them in my inbox. I can show you 10,000 ideas. They're not all good ideas, and they're not really all new ideas, but many of them are good, and a lot of them are new. But none of them matter if you don't just do it. So let me talk to you a little bit about how we create new ideas. This is the easy part of open government. This is the easy part of innovation. And we're starting with this flagship initiative, the one that I described to you already, as part of the department's formal response to Director Orzag's memo that required every cabinet agency to come up with an open government plan.
As a result of the innovation competition that I announced last summer, our dedicated VA employees suggested more than 10,000 new ways to cut through the red tape and the bureaucracy. And we're already putting dozens of these innovative ideas into action. Additionally, we're enabling more veterans to check the status of their claims online and from their cell phone. As the next step, we're opening this competition to entrepreneurs and academics so the best minds in America can help us develop the technologies to serve our vets, including those of you with multiple traumatic injuries. And we're going to keep at this until we meet our commitment to cut those backlogs, slash those wait times, and deliver your benefits sooner. This is a priority, and we are going to get it done.
Open government is about innovation. Innovation is about invention and implementation. And one of the richest sources of innovation and implementation sit in this room. It's the academic world. It sits in another part of this room. It's the private sector that, of course, wants to sell things to the government. We know that. There are ways of doing this transparently. There are ways of doing this fairly. And many of the ideas are also in this room. There are people who've spent their career working for civil service. So here's what we came up with for the first industry competition. In the process of working through these proposals now, hundreds of proposals, according to our specific and special needs. Your needs will be different. Don't use this list when you make your innovation initiative. Come up with your problem list, and then go ask industry in a very targeted and focused way to help you. We started this with the so-called VBA initiative, Veterans Benefits Administration. One of the biggest problems in the United States in the VA is that the wait time for veterans who have legitimate claims of injury or service-connected disability. Someone who has a bad knee because of their service in the military, someone who has a serious injury, maybe perhaps lost a limb because of the conflicts. They wait too long. They can wait half a year or more. And we're trying to solve that problem, taking a manual, paper-bound process and turning it into an automated digital process. And we're using knowledge management tools that you can buy. This one, I want to say it cost $2,000. We'll find the money, right? It's not the hard part. And make it available to everybody. Make it available, even the ones who have horrible things to say, even the ones who may pose, let me say, improper or sometimes even indecent, whatever your standard for that might be. Make it available. 6,500 users, 3,500 ideas. This is the notorious agency inside the federal government. Average age higher than every place else, innovation languishing for 25 years, everything in paper, everything with 2 screens. I've gone to the offices, I'll show you a picture in a second. I've gone to the offices where I've seen somebody reading data on one screen and typing it into another screen. They couldn't even cut and paste. It was bad. 6,500 users from 19,000 employees. Well, you say, well, geez, that doesn't sound very good. It's only about a 33% participation. Those of you who have done any marketing at all, I know it's the same in Turkey as it is in the United States. You expect the, it's a technical term, the attachment rate. How many people will actually participate? 2%. If it's glamorous, if it's interesting, if it's important, you might get 5%. We got 33%. It's why the president is talking about it. And we have a lot of new ideas that we would not have gotten any other way. This is the list that came from our employees. VA, Veterans Affairs, where I work, where Secretary Shinseki is the leader of 310,000 people, it's a lot, is divided functionally into 2 groups. I've already mentioned the hospitals, where you have 6 million people getting medical services every year. Everything from penicillin for strep throat to heart transplants. The entire spectrum of services you can get from VA. And then we have the Veterans Benefits Administration, this paper-bound, moribund, ineffective claims processing system. This is the other one. This is back to hospitals, VHA, Veterans Health Administration, where we used a different knowledge management tool. And you can use this one too, and this one was cheaper. And it was about the same. It was good. I like them both. VHA has approximately 210,000 employees. So it's 10 times larger. The budgets, interestingly, are about the same because we put so much money towards taking care of service-connected disabilities. And we put about the same amount of money into the hospitals. But the number of people, the number of doctors, nurses, hospital administrations, people who pick up the veterans, get them to the places, all that is much larger. We still had 20% participation, outrageous, and 6,500 ideas. And again, this is not the interesting part for you, but we picked them. We picked them in a very methodical, I would even argue scientific way. Your way will vary. Your outcomes will be different. All I'm trying to do with this talk is to convince you to try it your own way. Last but not least, there's a new access that we have to new media. And by new media, we mean things like Facebook and YouTube and Flickr. So imagine this. We can take a computer, type up a press announcement, put it out through the media channels, and somehow somebody who might be interested might find it. There are veteran-centric media channels. So my constituency knows where to look. I do my best to get my information out there as much as I can, but it's one-directional, right? They don't even know it's coming. All of a sudden they wake up and said, oh, Peter did that again. Nice. With the new media, with the social media, things like YouTube and Facebook, you can put the information out there, and yes, I know, believe me, you can't imagine the fights that I have with people who think that the Veterans Affairs Department is comprised of evil people who come from another planet, and all they want to do is make the life of veterans hard. And they write to me every day on Facebook. That's life. Most people are happy. And many people who are happy write comments too. I have 100,000 impressions a day, 100,000 a day coming to my website looking at new information. They know where to go. We're telling them interesting things. Yeah, some of them aren't happy, but many of them are happy. And then they write us comments. One of them wrote me a comment and said, I can't get my claims process and I can't get to the hospital. I can take care of it. If I don't know about it, and if I'm waiting for one of the millions of phone calls for somebody to say, oh, I can help you, it's not going to work. Okay, now we get to the implementation side. Just do it. Make sure that you're doing this not with proprietary systems. Sorry to all the software vendors out there. I used to work for you. Thank you for enabling this conference. But I'm going to be pushing everybody I know to make sure that we do this in an openly architected, standards-based, modular way, that I can fix problems when I find them, because there are going to be problems, that I can extend it when one of my 10,000 ideas says, hey, why don't you do this on the website? Great idea. A week later, not a month, not a year, not 5 years later, a week later it's up on the website, right? You need to be able to design for that kind of flexibility. One of the first projects that I worked on was suicide prevention. And you're going to see this schema, see this model over and over again in the last part of the talk. There's a gray circle there. I don't know if it's very easy for you to see. But as you start describing these new information-centric projects, these new information technology-driven ideas, that's a good way to start. A use model is a drawing of the website. Now, this is a little bit different than the way that we used to build these large, heavy, complex programs with the card readers outside. Turhan, you and I have done this many times. With the card readers, and don't tell me how to do it. I'll tell you how to do it. I'm the engineer. You're not. Just tell me what I want. Give me all of your money now, and come back in 5 years, and I might have built you a car instead of the house that you originally asked for. We'll see. At least that's how we did it for many years in the United States. First of all, let's agree about what you want. Then we can come up with the schematic.
The hopelessness has led too many of our troops and veterans to take their own lives. So today I want to say in very personal terms to anyone who is struggling, don't suffer in silence. It's not a sign of weakness to reach out for support. It's a sign of strength. Your country needs you. We are here for you. We are here to help you stand tall. Don't give up. Reach out.
Suicide prevention for the armed services is a very serious issue. It ends up that just demographically, there's more exposure. You can imagine this. These are young people. They're in extreme danger. They're missing their families. They don't know what happens after they leave the service. The pressure is intense on this volunteer army. It's a politically volatile issue. It's a question of social justice in my mind. It is, in fact, how I ended up coming back into government. So we came up with a use model. We figured out what we wanted the websites to look like. And here's the schematic, and that's not interesting for you. It's interesting for people like me, but it's how do you take this picture that everybody can understand and turn it into a language that engineers can understand? And then last but not least, how do you measure the results? And all of these things are agreed upon before you spend the first dollar or lira. You understand what it should look like, what the schematic is, and how you're going to know if you're successful before you get started. It was a very, very successful project. And I'm just going to very quickly now walk through some of the other ones so you give you a flavor of the kinds of things that you can do with open government.
We're hiring thousands of new claims processors to break the backlog once and for all.
40-year-old
and to make sure the backlog doesn't come back. We're reforming the claims process itself with new information technologies and a paperless system. We got an amen over here.
This is a 40-year-old problem, almost going back to the Second World War. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we come up with a use model. What do you want the website to look like? How do you implement that website, and how are you going to know? There's a picture on the left. I took this picture. I went to one of the 57 regional offices, and there are mountains of paper. If you've ever seen the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, do you know this? The famous Harrison Ford movie, where it's just incredible caverns of paper at the very last scene when they're hiding the ark, right? It looks like they went to a VA office to shoot that movie. And we turned this into something that looks like a website that any person in this audience could use easily. This is what we started with the schematic. This is a bad schematic. Don't take a picture of this. This is what the people who were not expert were doing before some folks that have built large enterprise systems got started with it. and we turn it into something that's just a little more sensible. Many people in the audience probably are not technologists and would be bored by this, but if you wanted to, tell me your most difficult problem, and I'll come up with, or somebody like me will come up with, a nice little wire diagram. Oh, so you want to know this information for this purpose, and it resides in this place, and if you had it, you would do this thing, and this would be the result. We can draw that. That's easy to do. And what we think is that we're going to be able to reduce the outcome by as much as 40 days this year. By the way, that would be unimaginable. That would be nearly a miracle if we could do it. In fact, what I told my boss is I'm going to cut it in half in 2 years. So we'll see. At least I know what I want. And then there's a couple of more projects.
Who may have been exposed to Agent Orange and who now suffer from 3 chronic diseases. We're making it easier for you to get the health care and benefits you need.
So this is a new kind of processing system. I won't burden you with the details. Another serious political problem, another serious services problem. It's the same story I'm telling you now over and over again for the last 7 minutes, and I didn't put them all on the slideshow, obviously. And what did I do? What are you trying to accomplish? How are you trying to accomplish it? And what are the results that you're looking for when you're finished? So we have a schematic for this one too. And we're doing this all over again for
just
health
as
records.
those delays were unacceptable, so too are long delays in the claims process. So Secretary Shinseki is working overtime to create a single lifetime electronic record that our troops and veterans can keep for life.
So this is the virtual lifetime electronic record dealer. And how did I solve this problem? Me and my team, use models, schematics, outcomes, and this picture is a little bit more interesting. This should remind you a little bit of one of the principles of open government, which is to make it modular, to make it openly architected, and to make it easy to extend. This one might not seem easy to extend. For computer scientists, it goes very well. And then I think this is my last example, and my favorite one. So I don't know enough about the Turkish healthcare system to know if you have this problem, but I know many countries do, and I can tell you from a healthcare reform perspective, magic words that I bet you've heard if you follow anything about US domestic politics. President Obama was elected on many platforms, on many issues. Maybe the most important one was fixing our healthcare system. That discussion breaks into 2 pieces very quickly. One of them is who pays? When do they pay? How much do they pay? Who gets the money? I don't want to talk about that. First of all, I'm not expert to talk about that. And second of all, that's an administrative problem, strictly a question of policy. And we've done, we think, a magnificent job of starting to unravel the horrible, debilitating, even sometimes lethal rules of people who even had health insurance. Listen to this. Had health insurance, got a horrible disease, go to the health insurance company 25 years after paying premiums, and the health insurance company can say, oh, we found an exception. 15 years ago, you were 2 days late on your premium because of the weekend, and your policy is violated. This happened. These kinds of outrages were true. So the part of the process that talks about the administration of funds, let's put that on a table. We can talk about that some other time. I want to talk to you about healthcare. I want to tell you that healthcare reform, for me and for my family, is about better health. And so while the payment process, the insurance process in the United States, still problematic, is extremely important because it's not going to be better health. We're not going to get it until we actually solve that problem. 2, where you have my attention, is something called a blue button. So in the United States, if you go to a doctor, many of you I suppose have done this even in the United States, the first thing that they hand you, no matter who the doctor is a clipboard and a pencil and you write your name, and you write your address, and you write your insurance information, and some page on page 9, you write what might be wrong with you, what you think as a non-medical expert might be wrong with you. And the bad news, that's bad, right? That's bad enough. The bad news is that you do this every time you go to the doctor. It's a waste of time. You don't remember everything. And the doctor doesn't really have any way of scaling it. That information is not usable to him. One of the people who I work with very closely on the Blue Button is a medical doctor, literally a brain surgeon, and tells me stories where he's sitting in front of someone who needs surgery, 50-year-old guy, generally good health, and he's asking all the traditional questions, the guidelines of medical questions. And he says, any major surgeries, any major medicines, how are you feeling, why are you here? And the guy says, oh, I've had great good health, and I take something for my cholesterol, and my blood pressure is under control, and my weight is a little up, but not too much. And then the guy takes off his shirt, and there's a big scar down the middle, and he's had open heart surgery. He had to get a valve replaced, and he forgot to mention it. Oh, sorry, you're right, I'm glad you looked. All right. He wasn't trying to cheat. It's just the way that people think about their interactions with doctors, right? He's nervous, he's scared, it's a new human relationship. There's 1,000 not bad reasons for this bad outcome. We solve this with this new thing called a Blue Button.
Today I can announce that for the first time ever, veterans will be able to go to the VA website, click a simple blue button, and download or print your personal health records so you have them when you need them and can share them with your doctors outside of the VA. That's happening this fall.
Okay, it happened 2 weeks ago. This speech was on August 4th, and the VA went live with the Blue Button on September 1st. We have, I checked this literally as I was coming downstairs to give this talk, we have 40,000 users of this new capability, people who are downloading their electronic record, new format, very simple format, and they can use it to give to their caretakers. It's very often a spouse or a child. They can use it to give to their doctors, or they can carry it with them in case they end up in an emergency room. It's, I think, one of the most important accomplishments of the administration, of the VA Health Record Initiative so far. And we started with, guess what? A use model, and schematic, and some outcomes. So this is what happens now. This is this very old-fashioned process where you present yourself at a medical center and you fill out a clipboard and somebody calls you later to tell you how your tests went. And this is what we do. As of September 1st of this year, 2 weeks ago. It's all the same, it's just that this new green arrow, right? We can report this back into this thing called a personal health record. And yes, there are privacy considerations, and yes, there are security considerations, and as it ends up, there are clinical considerations. If you're a doctor, I didn't know this, I just learned this, if you're a doctor, you don't really want people telling you about their own problems. They may forget about their open heart surgery. What you want is what they call a clinically valid record. The Blue Button is not clinically valid. I don't even pretend like it is. Yet. And this is just the graphs that we use to demonstrate to the secretary, who demonstrates to the president, who talks about it in public, about why we think it's a good idea. These are just used numbers. Okay, we're almost done. Innovation is fundamentally about new ideas and about putting them into practice. And OpenGov is about changing the culture that allows people to have new ideas and put them into practice. I thank you very much for your attention this afternoon. If we have time, I'd be delighted to answer questions.
Evet, Sayın Levin, sorular varsa onları almak üzere bekliyor. Eğer salonumuzda soru varsa kendisine iletebiliriz. Sanıyorum soru yok. Ha, var mı? Evet.
Will not issue with other people?
That's a great question. The question is, how did you overcome cannot, will not, do not? 5-minute talk on that, really, and it's actually in some ways just, hopefully this was interesting, that one might be more interesting. In our field, say, people have, I think, naturally, this was not because they were greedy or because they were stupid or because it was about our collective society's experience with this new thing that came around in 1990, this internet thing that all of a sudden changed everything, and the network stuff before that and the compute capabilities before that. And I'm guilty of this, I know that you are too. We started building these mammoth systems, right? I mean, if you looked at the first ones that I ever put out, they are not modular, they are not openly architected, they are not extensible, and if you had a bug, if you gave me enough money, I might think about fixing it, maybe. It depends on how much money, right? So if you were to draw what happens, it goes up very quickly in complexity, and then your job is to sustain this level of utility. So you build this large, complex device behind a curtain, like in The Wizard of Oz, and then all of a sudden the curtain goes up and maybe it's right, maybe it's not. It ends up that metaphor, that analogy, is very useful in leading people. And I'll tell you how. The new way of building large, important, politically relevant IT systems is to not do the big one first, it's to do the little one first. The suicide prevention chat line that I worked on literally in my first month on the job, in fact, was almost done. Those pictures that I showed you, I didn't draw any of them. They did that. And even some of my colleagues were saying, Peter, why are you wasting your time on this issue? And it's so small and nobody cares. And you know, the issue or the problem is important, but your little solution is not important. And I'll tell you why I did it that way. First of all, I have a passion for that issue. This is something that has impacted my life, and it's something that I really, really wanted to contribute in Washington. So first of all, there was personal passion, and if you don't have it, don't get started. Second of all, I wanted to show a bunch of people who did not believe it could be done that it could be done. They had a very simple technical problem. They had a very simple administrative problem. I solved it in 2 weeks, 3 phone calls, and a thank you note to the secretary, and you're done, right? And then what I figured out, I didn't know this, but now it's sort of documented. People are writing books, not about me, but about this process, right? People are figuring out all over the place that what you want to do are these very small sort of baby steps, very simple things. Don't try to, the beautiful English expression is boil the ocean. I don't know how well that will translate. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to do everything all at once. Just do the simple thing that you can get done today. Do the simple thing you can get done this week. Do the simple thing you can get done this month. And then all of a sudden you realize all of these things that you've done. So instead of a graph that looks like this, where you're making something very hard and trying to design, you get a graph that looks like this, very easy, it seems like it's not very important, and then all of a sudden you're processing claims and transferring records and helping people. And this curve goes higher than this curve. Small steps gain credibility.
Zannediyorum. Mikrofonu ulaştırabilirsek.
I have a way of doing this in Turkish if you want.
How was the impact of this open government initiative? Was the money saving for the government, cost saving at least, or how was the responses from the people?
That's a great question. So the short answer is not yet.
Okay.
Right? Which is politically explosive. That's political dynamite. In the case of medical records, so let me talk specifically about the ones that I know. In the case of medical records, we do have models, very sophisticated models, that show that it will save money. And I can refer you to those if you like, but it ends up that anything you can do with a computer is cheaper than anything you can do with a pen, right? That seems obvious somehow. There's a transformation cost, there's a transition cost, there's a training cost, don't forget training. but eventually you save money, and we can show that at the VA we've saved billions over many years because we already have an internal record. It just wasn't liquid. It wasn't available to the outside. In the case of the claims processing system, we haven't saved a penny yet, but if we do what we think we're going to do, it will be 10% of the cost. And this is a very simple model. I can show this to you on the back of an envelope. I know how many people I have. I know how much it costs to keep the systems. I know how many more people I'm going to need to do it the old way. And I know how many people I'm going to have on the new system. I know how fast that is. And if you compare the costs, one of them is hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, and one of them is ones of millions. I think there's a question in the middle.
Peki o zaman son bir soru daha alalım çünkü programı aksatmamamız gerekiyor. Maybe the last question. Is that okay?
Evet, ben Türkçe soracağım sorumu. Okay. Bu açık devlet sistemi.
Sorry.
Bu açık devlet uygulamasını bürokrasi nasıl karşıladı? Bir direnç oldu mu?
I don't fully understand the question. Do you mean inside government or outside government? Inside government.
Evet, okay.
Inside. Huge resistance. And I alluded to this in my discussion. For me, for someone who has spent most of my career in the private, worked at universities for a long time. I've run businesses. I've worked as an investor, and I enjoy the risk. I've also been unemployed. I've been abruptly unemployed. Gone to work in the morning and come home in the afternoon worried about next month's salary. Has happened. In the government, because of the laws and because of the unions, they are much less vulnerable. They're much less volatile in their employment. And yet most of the people who I've worked with in the private sector, they're more like me. They're like, well, yeah, I could lose my job and then I'll have to invent something else, or I'll have to do something else, or I'll have to write a new resume, or I'll have to apply. Happens. That's at least, that's US version of market capitalism. But the government guys don't have any of this, and in the outside of government, they thought this is a great idea. I get thank you notes every day. And inside government, they're worried, finally I answer your question, they are worried that they could lose their jobs if they do something wrong. And so you have a lot of people just waiting for me to go away, waiting for Secretary Shinseki to go away, and hoping that President Obama doesn't get reelected. All of these things are true. And so it kind of gets back to Saeed's question. So you can have this conflict, you can have anger and yelling, and you're bad, no, you're bad, and nobody wins, right? You can't do that. But you'll find a few people who want to. I was at a very important meeting a couple of weeks ago talking about a safety issue in a medical point of service where a uniformed military officer stood up and was literally yelling at me. 300 people in the room, where's Peter? You are my problem. What did I do? And then that same person comes up to me after the meeting is over, tears in the eyes, saying that she knows everything she said was wrong. And she had to do it that way because her boss was in the room and he doesn't like me. So now I have a new friend, right? It's not personal. I said, use model and schematic and business logic and outcomes. I'm just saying those same things in a very, very specific problem in a pharmacy. Can you believe this, right? And so she's now my conspirator. Now she and I are friends and we email each other and we have a link, and instead of being mad and saying, you said something in a public place insulting me and you were wrong, I say, oh, you have a conscience, something was bothering you. You know you did the wrong thing, and now we're going to fix it together. I've done that 200 times in a year. And that's sort of how we're starting to change the culture. It's related to Saeed's question. You have to find people inside the bureaucracy. There's a famous song by the American folk singer Arlo Guthrie. I don't know if that's well known in Turkey. In the United States, everybody my age would know this guy. And he sings that you should practice random acts of defiance. He doesn't mean violent defiance, he means social defiance. And I have found that to be a very, very productive strategy in my job.
Mr. Levin, thank you very much for your
speech,
useful speech. But could you please wait for a second for us, because we will have a ceremony for your contribution. Mr. Levin, could you please wait for a second?
Oh, sure.
Yes, because we didn't finish yet.
Okay.
Değerli konuklar, Profesör Levin'e teşekkür ediyoruz ve bugünün anısına Profesör Levin'e teşekkürlerini sunmak üzere Türkiye Bilişim Derneği Yönetim Kurulu Başkanı Sayın Turhan Menteş'i davet ediyoruz. Bugünün anısına bir plaket sunacaklar.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, good. Oops. Thank you.